So, huge spoilers for the final of The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live. If you haven't seen the episode yet, don't watch this video, it's just out today. But I'm not really going to script this video because I just finished the episode there. I very quickly sort of looked at some opinions and thoughts of what other people were feeling on Reddit, on Twitter, stuff like that, just to kind of get the vibe for what the episode was. Honestly, I was a little surprised that it seems to be mostly positive towards the episode so far, especially after the early reactions from people like Brandon Davis, who are a little bit negative and a little bit like people are going to have mixed feelings on the episode. I've seen a lot more positivity and a lot more just genuine love for the episode than I personally felt after the final. Like, I'm a little conflicted with a lot of it, a few mixed feelings for a bunch of reasons. Just straight away to get off the bat, I just want to say that I did think the final scene with Rick and Michonne was the best way to end the episode, end the show. I think getting that reunion was the best ending for the show, honestly. Like, that scene was great. We needed to see Rick meet RJ. We needed to see Rick reunite with Judith. We needed to see Michonne see them again. I would not have liked an episode, or I would not have liked an ending at all where one or both of them died, or where we didn't get to see any sort of reunion with the kids. Like, personally, I don't care that we didn't see any other characters, like that we didn't see Daryl or Carol or Gabriel come back. Anyone from the main show, I'm happy or fine we didn't see any of that. The only people I legitimately thought we absolutely had to see were Judith and RJ seeing Michonne and Rick, and we got that. So as far as an ending, like the final scene, the final way to leave the show, I cannot be annoyed about that. That was the promise that we were given for the show. That was kind of what we were always sold as, is that this was a show for Rick and Michonne. They said this was a love story for those two characters. Getting to see that reunion was needed for sure. Also feels like there probably won't be a season 2 after. I honestly really thought we would get a season 2. I thought there was no way that they would wrap up everything satisfactory in this episode, and that we would probably get a season 2 that would delve more into the CRM and into Beale and a lot of this sort of stuff. Now, that's kind of where my issues sort of lie. Not the fact that we're not getting a season 2. I think it's fine to have this be a limited miniseries, but the way they dealt with the CRM, with Beale, with Thorne, with all of that sort of stuff. My main issues lie with that story and the way that that was told and the writing to do with that story, not with Rick and Michonne at all. I honestly think almost everything to do with those two were perfect in this episode. It's also a little hypocritical of me to get annoyed over the CRM and Beale stuff, because in all my prior reviews, I have talked about how this is not a plot focused show, that this is a show about Rick and Michonne, and that this is what the show is putting at the forefront of everything else. The show is putting Rick and Michonne at the center and making sure that you know that the plot isn't nearly as important as it is in the other spin-offs, and that Rick and Michonne are what this show is about, so the plot comes secondary to that. So I shouldn't really be too annoyed that the plot ended up not reaching the levels that in my head I was expecting it to reach, because that was never supposed to be the focus of the show. That was never supposed to be what we were getting out of it. But I kind of have to voice my thoughts and opinions on it, because I was very, very, very disappointed in how they handled things, especially Beale, the echelon briefing, how they wrapped up the CRM so quickly in what felt like 2 or 3 minutes after they've been set up since 2018. Like, we've been seeing those helicopters show up in The Walking Dead in seasons 8 and 9. They were shown a couple times in Fear the Walking Dead, and we had an entire 2-season show about them in The World Beyond, which that show alone not only hyped up the echelon briefing and Major General Beale so much. Beale mentioned all the time in World Beyond. Beale mentioned all the time in this show. We really didn't get to see a lot of Beale in this show. We saw Beale a little bit in the first 3 episodes, like kind of just cameo scenes pretty much, and then we saw him fully in this episode. After being hyped up so much, this is kind of the only episode in the entire franchise where he was like an actual character. Like, we finally got an insight into who he was. He kind of explained a lot of his motivations, a lot of who he is. When he was describing the echelon briefing, it really came across that he was turning into the person he was originally fighting against, which I thought that was so interesting. And as soon as they describe a lot of that, they kill him off. And for a few seconds, for a few minutes, I actually thought they didn't kill him off because they were being so coy, or I guess hiding so much, like if he was actually dead. You know, after Rick stabbed him, they didn't show his body, they didn't really pan to that. We just kind of cut to Rick having thrown him in the giant crate thing. We saw the scene with a little bit of blood coming out, and I thought maybe we're gonna get a reveal that he wasn't actually dead yet, that he'd jump out of there, and then they cut to him being a walker, and I was like, oh, so you get Terry Quinn as what you're hyping up as your main villain of your franchise. You barely use him at all after having him for 6 episodes of a show, and then when you finally actually use him in an interesting way, you kill him off. That to me was very disappointing. And I think that kind of summarizes how I felt about a lot of the CRM in this episode, because I actually loved the first 20 minutes. I thought how they were dealing with a lot of the stuff was really, really, really interesting and done in a really cool way. Like the Rick and Beale scene, like before Rick and Beale turn on each other, that whole scene and that whole sequence was so interesting in how they were doing it. It was maybe the most interesting dynamic in a Walking Dead series, I think, since like Nick and Troy in Fear the Walking Dead season 3. Like there was just this dynamic here where it's two characters who are, I guess, trick the other person in a way. Like Beale is very much trying to get Rick onto his side and kind of manipulate him a little bit to do that, while Rick is trying to make Beale think that there's nothing really up with him and try and manipulate him in that way. We get a lot of these little cuts of flashbacks, and a lot of the time that really worked. We're kind of getting an insight into what Rick is thinking at this moment. Like we see him think about the governor, the hunters, Negan, stuff like that, and we kind of get a feeling that Rick is, I guess, comparing Beale to them on a villain level. Like he's seeing in his head, okay, Beale is just the next Negan. Beale is somebody who needs to die. He's the next kind of enemy on my list here. He's the next big bat, and I really like that. Then vice versa, we've got Michonne sort of getting the briefing about Portland and what they're doing to the children, and she starts thinking about Carl and RJ and Judith, and it's a lot of really, really, really interesting stuff here. Now, sometimes I did think they went a little bit overboard with the flashbacks. Like one of the moments I thought was kind of not needed was when Beale says, swear on the sword, and then we cut to Okafor saying, swear on the sword back in episode 1. To me, that felt like a complaint I used to have with the Arrowverse shows. Flash used to have a huge problem with flashing back to things that happened very recently because they didn't trust that the audience would remember things. It feels to me like the people who are editing it or the people who are overseeing the edit don't trust that the viewers are going to be able to understand or connect dots on their own without being pushed. And the Flash was terrible with that. To me, sometimes it felt like the show was doing that a little bit here, but also this could just be me because, as somebody who's been reviewing these episodes, who's been talking about these episodes more than a lot of, the general audience might be, maybe this is something that was needed to kind of push an audience in that direction. But in general, I thought a lot of that was really interesting, and the dynamic there was really, really, really cool. I liked a lot of that. I liked like Michonne sneaking around the CRM base. I liked kind of Rick going full feral mode, like beating that guy. Like there was a lot of really, really, really great stuff between Rick and Michonne here that I felt was on par with the rest of the show. Like, because episodes 1 to 4 for me are really, really, really good. Like some of the best Walking Dead we've had in years, and probably on the level of like some of the best seasons of the main show. Like that was really great. Episode 5 I felt like was a little bit of a step down, but episode 6 I thought for the majority of it was a step up. It just when it came to wrapping the main story up that I feel like a lot of it fell apart. I felt like very rushed. But I think a part of this is because for the first 20 or so minutes, it doesn't feel like we're in a final. It feels like we're in an episode that is gearing up towards what the culmination is going to be. Like an episode that's a few episodes from the final or an episode from the final. I think kind of jumping straight into us destroying the CRM so quickly, or destroying, I guess, all the bad parts of the CRM so quickly was kind of crazy. Like Thorne as well was dispatched super easily. Her kind of last scene where she sort of, I'm not even sure what her last moment there was supposed to be, where she's like, Okafor was right, prove Beale wrong or whatever. It feels like that was kind of a turn for her a little bit after she was so on board with Beale in the Echelon briefing. There's a lot of pieces to me that just didn't fit. It felt like when they wrote this show, they really, really, really knew that by the end of it, they had to get Rick and Michonne back to Judith and RJ, which they should have. That should have always been their planned ending. But they weren't entirely sure how to make that realistically or naturally move to that point until they could get a bunch of other things in line. So this episode was very much pushing a lot of those things into places where they don't naturally fit, but all just because they needed Rick and Michonne to end up in this place. To me, it was a little bit of a disappointing kind of writing direction to take it, especially after so much of this show was really interesting in how they approached the characters. Like, there was a lot of sort of nuance to a lot of these characters, I felt, and they were really trying to develop them in a really interesting way, which I feel like was maybe lost a lot of in this episode. Like in this episode, Beale is just very much sort of, by the time Rick decides Beale needs to die, Beale is very much just I guess a worse Walking Dead villain than anybody from the main show. Well, not anybody from the main show, but a lot of the main bads from the main show. Like, Beale didn't really leave much of an impact as much as, say, the Governor or Negan has. And that is also kind of disappointing, like, especially for a character who's been hyped up to the extent I would say maybe Negan was hyped up in the main show, where we were hearing about Negan or getting teases to Negan a long time before he showed up. Similar here, Beale is getting teases or sort of hyped up before he showed up, but Negan obviously left a much better impact because Negan was just around a lot longer, and Beale probably should have been around a lot longer. Like, even if this was the end of Rick and Michonne, I think there should have been something here where it's kind of hinting the CRM is concluding, and we can deal with that in Daryl Dixon. We can deal with that years later in Dead City. But Rick and Michonne don't have to be involved in it. We just deal with it somewhere else. Because I think the CRM story really should have been continuing. To have, over the course of so little episodes, this entire leadership be taken care of was an upsetting, not upsetting, but a disappointing way, I think, for this all to end up. But yeah, the ending was really good. The ending itself was really good. I just think getting to that ending was disappointing. I think this is probably my least favorite episode of the 6, unfortunately. But like, a lot of people really like the episode, and I'm really happy about that. I'm happy that it seems for the majority of the fandom it's hitting well. Like, for people who wanted to see a wrap up for Rick and Michonne, they felt like this was the best way the show could have went for them, and I really do appreciate that. I think just I was unfortunately expecting something a little bit more from the story department and from the writing department, which I felt like this episode didn't hit. Like, and I was worried it wouldn't stick the landing, and to me, I just don't think it did. But yeah, how did you feel about The Walking Dead: The Ones Who Live's final? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you feel how I'm feeling on it? Do you not feel how I'm feeling on it? Let me know. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, and all of that. Probably going to do a full season 1 review. That'll probably be scripted because I want to kind of like get my thoughts in line for that. Whereas the last few Walking Dead reviews have kind of just been not really scripting, kind of just like being like, okay, this is how I feel, this is how I feel. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have an amazing day.